I mean, when you look at this, guys, it's obviously tied to the way that the Chinese have retaliated to what President Trump has called currency manipulation. When we look at it right now, the yuan falling to its lowest level since 2011.
Yeah, well, the challenge here is really where's the floor, right? So, I mean, you had the Chinese yuan getting devalued against the U.S. dollar, as you mentioned, USD to Chinese yuan, up above 7, and we haven't seen that in a long time, actually for a good amount of time. And I think the question here is really, where do we see this escalating? We've seen that President Trump has feared that the U.S. dollar would get stronger and stronger, and for those who maybe aren't familiar with the way that Forex markets work, that makes it harder for U.S. companies to export, and for an administration that is so heavily prioritized increasing U.S. exports, that obviously does a lot of damage. We've seen it in the earnings so far, in addition to all the business fixed investment issues that the companies are just broadly seeing because of the lack of global growth prospects, not just in China, but in the EU, for example, and domestically here in the U.S. as the Fed has eased rates because it's worried about what's looming around the corner. So there's a lot of questions about how far we'll get into this tariff war. And I mean, the worst case scenario would be this extending through 2020, which President Trump has said is a real possibility.
And on the short end there, too, Charleton, when we look at it, just in the short term, the way that the U.S. might respond to what the Chinese have just done here by devaluing their currency, when we look at it, I mean, on our side, you talk about 10% in terms of tariffs hitting about $300 billion worth of Chinese goods planned right now for September. But President Trump has talked about that potentially going up from 10 to potentially 20% as well.
Well, it's really interesting, though, because, I mean, how much of that can either side do? 10% of tariffs, you're talking about September, you're talking about heading into the holiday season, you're talking about heading into the 2020 election. So you can do that, but once that really starts to cripple U.S. business, I'm sure Trump would like to get reelected in 2020. He's been running on a strong economy. Once people really feel in their pockets that the economy is not that strong, I don't know that he'd be able to do that.
And once consumer sentiment starts to shift as well, potentially, if they see the sticker shock of what is about to come.